Hickey here from Hickey's Custom Resto. Just wanted to do a bit of an update on something we talked about in another video. So about body lines. So this body line right in this area here had a dip in it. So what had likely happened is something hit it, put a dent in the car, and maybe someone worked it out, or maybe that's just how it went, but it was a little swollen here, and here kind of flattened, and it just sort of, had a little bit of a wave in it, a little bit of an M shape. So what I did here is I gently massaged it up. And when I say gently massaged it up, I didn't even hit that with a hammer. I kind of pushed on it in with my thumb. I took this guy here. It's the round Durablock. It's some 80, and I just used it as a file because it fits really nice in this groove, and you can kind of drag it up and down. And what it does is it shows the highs and lows. And then I put something right against where it seemed a little bit high. I can't remember what I used. I think it was just the handle off of a screwdriver. Something flat and plastic, not real hard. And I gave it a couple slaps with the hammer and just sort of massaged it in a wee bit. And then when I drug this back across, it put scratch lines in it straight through. So it was pretty close. Now, trying to get this out without taking the fender off, you'd have to go in behind and dolly the shape, and you can do that, but it wasn't out by much. And when I knocked that in, I also had to knock this in. You see this round spot here? That's probably the highest spot, but I mean, it's gone now. Like what you see is, it's flat. But what I did is I ran filler way down here, and I filled this, and what I did is I went off the angle flat, and I put a little arrow, and I filled this with filler, I filled this with filler, and then you couldn't go flat. Like, how would I explain that? I basically took the Bondo spreader with a bit of filler and angled it like so. So as you can see, you're filling the whole thing in right to the line, where the line is good. But when I came here where that little dip was, well, once I knocked this out, the dip mostly went in. I let that and that kind of set up, and then the next course I just filled in that spot. Then I added a little bit to the top and ran right across the whole thing. I let that dry for maybe 5-10 minutes, mixed up a mild batch. I went way down here and filled the whole bottom. So I wonder, filler to fix the fender, then this white filler, but if you look up here, there's like a little filler you're seeing through the primer, and then you can definitely see it here. Here the definition was gone. Because this is an old fender that saw a lot of dings and it was all pushed in, but so this filler is going to stay here because this, when you file it down, is all straight. So this is all full of filler. I should have showed how this was done because it was a little bit, you've probably seen the tape trick where you run a tape down a body line and follow the tape back and forth. But in this case, what I tried to do is ignore the body line and concentrate on this indent to make it all the same. Now it gradually kind of disappears and then reappears, sort of. But I think that's because of the shape of the fender as well. And I looked on the other side. So once I had in here, just below the line true, I did the same thing up here. And dragging across where here you can almost see not metal, but it's another primer below. And here it's into the, the original white stuff that was in there. I think it's a filler. But this basically drug nice and straight across here, and it was a little bit up from the line, literally up here. And once I got those two planes where I wanted them to be, there was enough filler stuck to the line that we were basically able, now I don't want to put scratches in it because I've made it pretty fine, But with the 80 grit on the cylinder, I basically ran that line nice and straight, like I was saying. And then I went up like so, up like so. And if you kind of twist it like that, you know, you can get it pretty quick. But the more you do it, like anything else, the better you get. So once I got that real nice, I came off the line, but what I did is I kept watching the line all the way down. You can't just kind of try to concentrate where you gotta make the line right. And the line's a little bit round, so I didn't know if the tape would work. But the cylinder is very straight. Even though the line has a little bit of arc, you can kind of put your fingers a little more here, and it'll kind of automatically push that with the block, because the block's a little bit flexible. And I basically just kept coming up like so until in here looked nice, totally ignoring the line, and it just curved up. And then I came from the top down and did the same thing. But when I did that, once I had this plane nice, and to make sure this plane was nice, I put 3 quick coats of primer on with a rattle can like so, just to look down it while it's wet, and you'll literally see any nastiness in there. So you sand it out a little more, touch it up, whatever you got to do. Once you get that curve, it's almost like a tidal wave, you know? Reminds me of surfing. But once you get that, when you're coming down, you come down, and what I was doing was staying about 1/8 of an inch above the line with this curve. And then once I was happy with that, I could come over the curve and kind of drag it up, drag it down, crisscross, until the line went right where it should go. Now then the line becomes too sharp, and at one point I just gently went across, and I mean, you're putting almost no pressure until you get it nice. Now I do have right in here, I can feel a little bit of, there's a void here, here, and right here. So we're gonna have to put a bit of filler in that void. But just to show you how straight it can be. And again, we'll probably just sand this, most of it off. So when we put our primer, sealer, high build, whatever we decide to go with. And then the ultimate test, give me a second here, is to catch the light and follow the body line. We're really, really close, but there's 2 spots where you see a little, what almost looks like a wave, but that's actually those little divots I was showing you. They're kind of creating a wave in the glossy finish. But when you come down here, you can clearly see that line. I think that's true enough, especially on a yellow car, that's gonna cut it. So I'm pretty happy with that. Now, if this car was gonna be glossy black, where that might show a lot, or a hard metallic with a lot of stuff in it, what I would do, touch up the little spots, get it nice, but then I'd probably just get some cheap black shiny paint, spray paint the line, put a few coats on it, make it a little heavy, make it glossy, because that black in shiny black is going to show up everything. It's like, I remember years ago I had a boss, and he said, if you really want a nice car, you got to almost paint it twice, because when you paint the whole car, you can see all the stuff, then you know what to fix and paint it again. Now you can use guide coats over primer and over filler and different things to kind of help you see that, but nothing holds a candle to gloss black paint. So that's a trick I learned way back in the early 90s from this crazy guy that I was working with, and his name was Bandit. I don't know what his real name was, but he's a pretty crazy guy, scratchy voice, drank a lot, probably died early, you know. Live fast, die young attitude. And he was a French Quebecer guy, pretty neat guy. But when he couldn't see something, it was driving him nuts, he'd grab a rattle can, paint it black, let that dry, make sure you get a nice shine on it, like make a nice wet black with your rattle can, and that'll show up everything that sucks. And I mean, then you got to sand it all back down, but now you got a better idea what you're doing. Now, what I like to do is I do that when I really have to. I don't know if I did a video on it, but last year when I did the 70 Dodge Dart Swinger, the rear quarter, like the body of that car was really good, but one rear quarter must have been hit or something and it had been replaced. And there was a lot of filler in it, you know, old school bodywork from like 1980 something. And it was driving me nuts trying to level it. And no matter what I did, it looked good, but it wasn't quite where it should be. So finally, I spray painted the whole quarter, like 3/4 of the center of it, gloss black. And well, I basically had it parked like so, opened the garage door, the sun's down that way, and looked down the fender. And I could see then what I had to do. Now in the case of that car, you had a gas cap that was here, and the way they had filled it, it almost looked like the whole car rounded into the gas cap. Just the way they did the work. And then up here somewhere, where you had the swinger badging, there was oh right, there was a patch made here before I got the car that was so hot that it put a dent here. So you had a wave here, and then that weird thing at the gas cap. But once I did it in gloss, I realized I could camouflage 90% of the dent by filling that up to the gas cap and then just shaping around the gas cap a little bit to make it all blend together. But at least this way, when you look down the car, you didn't see a big dent. Where this piece here, I basically went around, made it super rough, reflooded it, and just boarded it my way. Sometimes, and this is something that happens to a lot of us, especially when you're new at this, for you DIY guys, you get little spots and you feel little things. It's like you start, oh, there's a high, I'll fill around it, and you kind of start nitpicking little things. In the case of this up here, the sail panels on this car were all wavy and weird because someone had done that. They chased all the dents, tried to get them flat. You end up over sanding and then it all goes wavy again. It's just different waves, right? So sometimes you're better to look at it and say there's trauma all over the place. Like this body line, it wasn't just that little M, but there was other little issues here and there. Flood the whole thing more than you have to. Bring it back down. You want to have enough material and product on there that you have something to work with. Now in this case we did pretty good, and there's a couple little dots. See that one right there? See that little missing filler right there? Then up here there's a little bit of funniness. We're going to put a bit of filler and then just sand that by hand. Probably use some of that white metal glaze. But anyway, you can bring all this stuff back without trying to find a fender. And let's face it, when you find a fender for this car, now if you buy a new aftermarket, AMD's got a pretty good reputation. They probably make a good panel. But sometimes the car has variances. So the fender may fit really well on its own, but does it match the door, the hood, and so on? Look, it's aftermarket. It is what it is. And I think most of it is good, but you still got to do the body work. But if you have a good fender with a few things wrong with it, you can do that body work as well.